The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have a truly fascinating guest for you today. But before we jump into the conversation, let me just take a minute to remind everyone, today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, a whole lot of other things, including information about the new NAILD LSC, Lighting Specialist and Controls Certification. Check it out. There's a lot going on, and looks like we'll probably be doing this at the NAILD convention. So if you're going, we'll see you there. But also, huge shout out to the sponsor of this episode, which we could not do this without, MaxLight. You should check them out, maxlite.com/CMAX. That's their lighting controls platform, which is CMAX. They have a really awesome, innovative solution for lighting controls that you should check out if you're unfamiliar with it. You can set up all of your lighting, get it all installed without any lighting controls, and then add the modules after the fact. So you don't have to set up networked. You can do local, you can do basic. They have all of the options available, and you can swap them out. If you don't like it, try something else. And it's a really cost-effective, easy solution for lighting controls implementation. So check them out, maxlite.com/CMAX. But let's get into that conversation. So today we have Gina. Gina, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
I am an energy consultant here in California. I've worked in the energy consulting arena since the early 90s, so I'm really old. And I have evolved to specialize in lighting. I have to tell you, my background's mechanical, so it's a little odd that I'm in the lighting arena. And I've started working with the utilities, the Energy Commission, and becoming a code expert, of which I went to school as a music major. So this all comes as a shock and a surprise in terms of what I'm doing for a living.
I love how our industry just like collects people from all over the place, and I think it's not surprising with the mechanical background, because Lynn Gomes was the person who kicked you our way and wanted you to be on the show, and she started in mechanical too, and I think there's room for everybody in this industry regardless of background. I think all perspectives help us get better. But, I suspect, one of the reasons why Lynn wanted you on this show was because of your experience with code and the fact that you're out in California. And there are so many questions about energy code, Title 24, California, etc. Like, you go down the list, people are confused, people don't understand. And so, like, from your perspective, what is the first thing people should do if they don't understand anything about this?
Well, it's crazy, but you should start by actually reading the code. It's amazing to me where people are like, how do I do this? I'm like, did you even read the code? Well, no. Well, you should probably start there. And I get it. I mean, reading code language it's all legalese. And if you don't have a legal degree, it's hard sometimes to comprehend it. But if there's any experience with any of the codes, whether that be IECC or ASHRAE 90.1, it's going to look, feel, and act familiar. One of the things that is happening at the large arena of the United States is an alignment of the codes. So you're going to start seeing more and more the codes are going to be saying the same thing. So if you understand and are comfortable with one of the codes in the U.S., you've got a leg up on understanding what's going on here in California.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a large percentage of people who have not even looked at one code document, and they've kind of either used like the brochures that manufacturers will produce, like this is how we meet this code requirement. But yeah, I think it is really good to try to get into that and read it and understand it. And because it's a complicated language, like, what are some things people should look out for when they're reading the code?
I always tell people, one, find the right section. So if your question is about, a multifamily building, don't be in the single family or non-residential sections of the codes. All the
Yep.
codes break down occupancies, and we have different
Mhm.
requirements for different building occupancies. Be in the right occupancy. And then I tell people, read the exceptions first. Because I feel, why should I have to understand something if I immediately see an exception and I don't even have to think about this any further? So I always tell people, start with the exceptions. And only when you don't see one that fits your scope of work, start at the top. And look at those brochures, look at those guidance documents that are out there to make sure that you're not missing something. Where the energy code here in California is unique is how they have laid out the code, of which you have to go to 5 different chapters to understand what's needed for lighting controls in an office space. And that's
Right.
honestly ridiculous. There is, who's going to know
No
that,
argument
right? There
here.
is this
Right.
beautiful
Nobody.
special table in the code called Table 100.0-A. I call it Gina's favorite table. And it gives you the roadmap for all your building features tied to your building type. So it'll tell you all the places you should stop at along the way with your reading journey. But most of the materials that are provided, I've seen historically, they do a great job of identifying what code sections they're supporting with their documentation. And then just read it. And then you might have to read it 3 or 4 times. And then bring in someone who potentially can help you interpret it. That's why I make a living as an energy consultant. My clients hire me to help them take the code and apply it to their particular scope of work. They don't care about what the neighbor's doing unless they go, but that neighbor did it. Why can't I do it? Because they did it without a permit. But it's all about get the help you need. There's lots of help out there.
No, I think that, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you find code to be too dense, there are plenty of people out there who are willing to help you out, obviously for a fee. But at the same time, there's a reason why there's work that's paying work for this, because of the fact that, to some degree, these documents are inaccessible. So
Makes you wonder if they did that on purpose, right? Hey, let's create a whole new industry.
I don't think that was the intention, but we could certainly bring some of our code official buddies back on the show and grill them about that. But
code is
Regardless.
a stakeholder process. I don't care where you are. If you're talking IECC, if you're talking ASHRAE, you're talking Title 24, it's, especially the energy code, a stakeholder process in which everyone gets to have a say. And to me, that's why it's written so weirdly, because you had 100 people write it, and that causes complexity.
For sure. And that's also why we have some looping references, because some of those documents that you were saying, some of the chapters aren't the same groups of people. There's different groups of people doing different things. So to your point, that is sort of the result of a large group of people trying to do a single document. And so, over time, hopefully it'll get refined and a little bit more accessible to people. But also, it's interesting because Title 24 typically is like the bellwether for the rest of the codes. So you see like a lot of energy code kind of giving direction, and then other IECC, ASHRAE kind of following afterwards and adopting a lot of the standards that come out of that. And so
starting to see that shift a bit, I gotta tell you. Like
that's what I was wondering.
IECC ASHRAE 90.1, especially when it comes to like the control triggers, they're more stringent than California Energy Code.
Interesting.
What's unique about Title 24 Part 6 is it was developed as dictated by the Warren-Alquist Act. And the Warren-Alquist Act was established when we first introduced the energy code in California in the 70s, that all of those code requirements, with the exception of indoor air quality, have to show cost effectiveness. So they do these incredibly robust research and studies and models to confirm that one lighting control requirement will generate enough energy savings to pay for itself over its lifetime. And this is where we start getting things looking a little bit different in Part 6 here in Title 24 than the rest of the codes. Outside of California, they don't have to do that. They can just say whatever they want to say. And but that cost effectiveness is baked into Title 24 Part 6.
No, I think that
fascinating.
Yeah.
No, I was
Isn't
just
it great?
no, it's just, and this just even just that right there. This is the stuff that just goes right over people's heads and just blows them out of the water and says, I don't even know where to start. Right. So I know, you talked about starting with the code, but let's just assume you end up on a project and let's assume it's a distributor or an electrician, right? Not an architect, not a designer. And they get these project documents. What if they don't even know what version of code it is? What is really the best place for someone to start to really get just a handle on where they need to begin?
I think there's a few different avenues, and it depends on your role. I just got an email yesterday from someone who went, my building department is totally denying my permit application because I love to, I'm just replacing the light source of all my lights. No, you're taking down the old lights and you're putting entirely new luminaires up. That's not just replacing the light source. And their building department's like, no, you got to show compliance to the energy code. And this property owner, it was the dentist who owns that particular office, did it themselves and went, oh, and by the way, we only have manual area controls and everything's installed already. So you got to get that to work. So what they did is they did it all on their own. They waited until they got a plan check comment, which they're not allowing this. So it's work already done, which is illegal to begin with. And they were not able to bring in someone who can help them do it in the most cost-effective, streamlined fashion that meets their needs and gets them over the finish line with the least amount of issues. He's doing it the most difficult way possible. And I see that over and over and over again. So how he got my name is just word of mouth. And honestly, a couple of other energy consulting firms went, yeah, call Gable. They're like, oh, we don't want to touch this one with a hot pole. So what I think, searching out and finding the expertise you're looking for, whether you're that design professional, whether you're that building owner, whether you're a manufacturer. I get contacted by most of the manufacturers with each code cycle, and they're like, Gina, can you review what we're doing with our control manufacturing specs to make sure we're going to be able to meet the upcoming code? Bring in the experts into the level that you need it, and be aware they come at a cost, but at a cost that saves money and time. So to me, I always get frustrated when I have people who contact me and go, I need this, I need it tomorrow. And by the way, I only will pay you $100. So go forth and help me now. Had 2 of those emails yesterday. I'm not lying.
Whoa.
But there's also a lot of programs out there meant to help you. ASHRAE has a beautiful set of, guideline documents and manuals and so forth that are meant to speak, real words. It's still done by engineers, so it's their real words and not my real words. Energy Code ACE here in California, it's a codes and standards program that's funded by the ratepayers of California. So it's paid for. It's at no cost to you. And I am the subject matter expert that answers all of the commercial questions about Title 24 Part 6. And you're getting an expert that this is what I do for a living. And I can speak your language because I'm a music major. I don't care if you're that building owner or that control manufacturer or that engineer. So seek out where there is help.
No, I think those are really excellent resources for somebody who's trying to do their own research. I mean, I'm a big fan of Energy Code ACE, and their tools are very helpful. So I highly recommend people check that out. We'll have a link in the description to that resource for people who are curious. But I think the interesting thing here is that you've got people who don't understand it, don't really understand why it's important or where it's coming from, pushing back on this kind of service
Hmm.
and not recognizing what that ROI is actually going to be. And I see this all the time where people say, oh, LED ROI is done. Like there's no ROI for it. And lighting controls, you're just going to see like a 20-year return on investment. And so I'm curious from your perspective, like what is the typical ROI for a project that you work on?
Oh, there is no typical.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
mean, it depends on so
What's
many
what's
things. If you're expecting there's a standard formula for all project scopes,
no, no,
then
no, no, of course
I'm not
not.
going to be
But
telling you at all the ROI that you're hoping to hear.
But I mean, are you seeing like projects that have 20 plus year ROIs, or are you seeing projects that have 5-year ROIs?
Again, it
Okay,
depends.
fair
I
enough.
mean, I've had projects. I work with a lot of major retailers that
Hmm.
serve all of the US, and they'll come to me going, our primary goal is to have equipment that meets our lumen output and our color, that it's all exactly the same so that no matter where our stores are in the US, the same products are being used, where our maintenance staff can go from one facility to the other. And most of them go, and we've determined that, yeah, California code is the more stringent. We are more stringent typically of the wattage allowances, how much energy do you get to use
Mm-hmm.
for your lighting systems, whereas other code bodies are more stringent with lighting controls, in my opinion. And so they'll go, and we're going to design all of our stores to what's going to work in California. And their ROI is facility staff going to easily be able to go from one store to another? Can we
Mm-hmm.
buy our products in bulk? That's what's important to them.
Sure.
Whereas I have like this dentist office, theirs is just how do you get to work and not have me invest any more money in something I already installed and
Hmm.
it's not permitted. And I have the public coming in, and that is a liability nightmare.
Right.
So,
So it's not a quantifiable ROI. It's more of a subjective ROI, but
or what
you're
your goals
seeing.
are.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's based on your goals. And I think that that is one of the things that is unfortunate to lighting controls professionals anyways, is we don't really get to have those conversations very often where it's like, what do you want for your lighting control system? We'll be lucky if we get a footnote on the back sheet of something that says, I want this. Most of the time we're just guessing.
I think it's a travesty that it is not a requirement that a sequence of operations is required
Mm,
for all projects, because that's where
Yeah.
we get to get the building owners and the people who are using their spaces. We get to get
Hmm.
what is important to you, and how do I then look at a control system that, one, meets your budgets, meets your
mhm,
desires, can all work together smoothly, whether you have a mishmash of different manufacturers or not. And when is then the code going to require something that you're going to go, oh, I don't like that at all? And now we have to start having those conversations
Yeah.
of, is there any flexibility of that one feature that you don't like at all?
Mhm. No, I think that that's really important because we are seeing growth in having sequence of operations and lighting controls, but like you said, it's not a requirement. And so
Yet.
the people who, well, yeah,
I got to
I
tell you,
guess
I'm
that's a
voting
fair
for
point.
it to be required. I think it should be in code. I do. How are we
We
even
don't
supposed to?
disagree with you.
No.
Contractors are lost. How are they even
Yeah.
supposed to know how to install and commission all of these controls? And then when
Hmm.
the energy code here in California has control requirements that, hey, let's do the HVAC system and the lighting system and the outlets in the room. Let's just
Yep.
throw the kitchen sink at it while we're at it.
Yep. Yep. And that is, unfortunately, that's what we see all the time. We have this conversation about not having proper documentation and not having a sequence or a control intent narrative and not having that information. And without that, you're right. Contractors are lost. The reps are lost. The
Hmm.
people providing the lighting controls are lost because they're looking at the project, the area you're in, looking at code and saying, I have to provide you X. They don't
Yep.
necessarily know what the owner truly wants. So a lot of times there's things missing, or they've over-designed the system because they're planning on X, Y, and Z because they don't have the information to actually put together the right system. So people complain their controls are too expensive because the proper documentation wasn't provided to make sure that the system can be scaled appropriately, and that all the holes, it's always holes and gaps in the drawing sets and documentation that lead to these projects costing more than they should.
Or then you get different contractors who have different products they're comfortable with or things that they're
Yep.
comfortable with installing, and they come in and go, we're just going to ignore all those documents over here. We're going to start from scratch, and here's the pricing I'm going to give you on these particular products. And when that inspector comes in and goes, whoa, it's totally different than what was approved, at plant check, well, then what are they going to do? And we're starting to have more and more authority having jurisdiction enforcement, typically our building department. They're starting to go, no, this is not what was approved at plant check. And it's causing havoc out there with lighting systems that are being installed. And we put all that money investment, but it's not going to get finalized.
And so I'm guessing you've seen this happen a couple of times now.
Yeah.
What
many times.
What happens? Like, what is the result of that?
It can go a few different ways. It could be it's a particular organization that is building that particular site that city really wants, that taxable income. So their city hall basically says, building inspector, back off. And we get a building that is not energy efficient, is not meeting any of the criterias, but that city really wants that building to go live. So I see that happen more often than I ever want to see. We also have scenarios in which we have building inspectors who just don't really know lighting. They grew up, and their work experience is with a completely different building feature, but they're required to go out there and understand the install system is meeting a certain criteria that's in the design set. But as you said, there's all these holes. So they just go, whatever. Contractor, are you going to take full liability for everything here as meeting the code, and you're putting your license on the line? Okay, then I'm going to approve it. Or you have those inspectors that go, no, I just took a class from Gina, and she said you have to do this, and that's what I'm going to hang my hat on until you give it to me. I'm not going to give you an occupancy permit.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I would imagine that that's the word, like from the owner's perspective, the worst case scenario is that it's you must comply, and therefore you have to either rip out the entire lighting control system and reinstall the one that was approved or something.
It just becomes really uncomfortable because the one who's liable is that installing contractor who put their license in risk. But it could also be the building owner who went with the lowest bid. We know that happens a lot. But I find, especially for my corporate clients, their ultimate risk that they refuse to cross the line on is if it can do harm to the public and they open up themselves for liability. So if we have it where, lights are not turning up all the way, or they're dim, or this and that, and someone trips and falls and sues, that's not what they want whatsoever. And if someone points to it and goes, hey, there are code requirements saying that this shouldn't happen, but because your lighting system wasn't installed properly, it's not meeting the code that's meant to protect us as a health and safety measure, and I'm going to sue you.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the components that a lot of non-professionals, like lighting designers who don't stamp drawings, shy away from and don't want to get involved in, because that level of liability is something they don't want to be involved at the litigation level. So they may be part of litigation, but they don't want to be like litigated themselves. And so we see a lot of lighting designers saying, I don't do emergency. I don't do code verification.
Yeah, but if they're doing work, if they're actually, it's going into a building, they're subject to codes. They're subject to liability. That's just the way this industry is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm this energy consultant who talks to everyone and I pull together everyone's designs. I help support is your design compliant or not, and I give them paperwork. But guess what? My name shows up on nothing. I have no liability. But I still, as a company owner, pay for hefty liability insurance because I'm in the
Sure.
construction industry.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think that is a fair point because, when we're talking about really anything, if you're being consulted, you're a part of the team, and your
Mm.
advice, whether documented or undocumented, is still part of that process. And if for some reason something goes awry, you played a role in that. And like this, like the simplest example I point to is like on submittal reviews where the designers will just be like, no exceptions taken. And it's like, you still reviewed it. It's still approved.
Right.
You just didn't write approved down. And so, like, they think they can navigate around these kinds of things with these, shell game approaches, but it really doesn't, to your point, it doesn't really protect them. It
Nope.
just it just makes them feel safer. And so, but from a owner's perspective, though, like, how do you like trace down, like, okay, whose fault is this? Because that
Mm.
does become quite a giant wormhole of like
Have you
finger
guys ever been
pointing.
part of a lawsuit regarding a particular a construction project?
Me personally, no.
No.
So what happens is they sue everyone who even
Hmm.
looked at the project. So they don't try and figure out who's at blame. They sue everyone and they let the courts do that. And so that's
Hmm.
all going to be about, did you do the work to code? And if you didn't know code, well, then you can't say I did the work to code. Have you
Right.
completely documented your interaction with the project and so on and so forth? And did you take the liability measures or protections such as insurance that you should have
Hmm.
with the advice that you're given? And I have been part of a lawsuit. It took us a year and over $10,000, and this was 20 years ago, so how much that would be now, I do not know, for the judge to go, oh, why are you even here? You're not liable at all. Go away.
Mm.
So
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and I think that's. I apologize. My dog is barking in the background. So, I think the thing that's important to note here is that, like you said, they don't dial precisely into any one person. They just
right.
take the widest
Everybody.
shotgun approach they could, capture
Yes.
everybody who was involved, and everybody has to basically defend themselves.
Yep.
And if you don't have documentation prepped for that, then yeah, you could become right in the middle of the crosshairs. And I think that's why, there's a number of disclaimers that designers will use. But I think, again, it's challenging because, to your point, you said something really interesting, which is, if you claim you don't know code, then how can you advise on code? And how can you comply if
Or
you don't
advise
know?
on designs that are
Right,
subject to codes. So people go,
right,
well, I don't know the codes. I know design. I'm sorry, you can't design unless you know codes.
right, right. Because regardless of whose stamp is on the drawing, you're still giving advice to that person.
Well, and you want to give
So
them
yeah,
good advice. I mean, there's,
of course.
there's some designers out there that really love to push the envelope and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. But we unfortunately do have a box called code that might limit us, and potentially knowing what are the flexibility measures associated with code. Like here in California, we have the ability to use a prescriptive pathway, which is what's utilized throughout the rest of the United States. You meet these requirements and there's no wiggle room whatsoever. Every single
Mhm.
one of these has to apply to your lighting design. But we also have a performance approach that is state certified. So it is a software that is certified as meeting the energy code criteria. And I can start doing some trade-offs and I can get some flexibility. Outside of California, the performance approach is an incredibly expensive endeavor because you have to model a standard design and a proposed design and compare how you are to this code perfect standard design. Here in California, with that performance software supported by the Energy Commission, the standard design is automatically done with the software. So we're a lot less work, it's a lot less expensive, and it can provide a lot more flexibility. Unfortunately, there are no minimum qualifications for anyone who does this work. As I like to say in my classes, your 2-year-old can do the work I do, because there are no certification or qualification requirements for us helping people understand code.
Which is wild to me that you're, essentially acting as that professional, right? You're advising everyone on what the code actually is, how to interpret these documents, and yet there's no actual standard or test or anything for that, or certification to say, yes, I am certified to do this. That's wild to me. It really is. Lighting controls is the Wild West, 100%. It blows me
Well,
mind.
and I
Blows me
have
away.
2 types of clients. I have a client that comes in going, I see no value in what you do. I think the energy code is a bunch of bunk. And
Wow. Okay.
so charge me the least amount of money to give me that piece of paper I need to go through the building department, and I really don't want to hear from you. Have to tell you, we don't take those clients. But there are a lot of people who
I
do.
don't blame you.
No, I
And if
don't
you
either.
go on the internet and you start searching for energy consultants in California, you'll see a whole slew that go, hey, we're going to turn around and give you your compliance documents in 24
Yeah.
hours, and any job of any size is only $99. That's where we're
I mean, it
not
makes
getting
me,
the expertise. We're not getting the
yeah,
design assistance. But then I have the
Right.
clients who are like, no, I want to meet code, and I also want to know, how can I do better? What's the
yeah.
value to me, and now first time cost and long-term cost in terms of utility costs to my company.
Yeah, it feels like it reminds me so much of like car inspections, where it's like if you know a guy who will pass your car regardless of what happens, versus the person who actually makes sure that your car meets the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
you're putting your life into the hands of this individual who's gonna just, whitewash and sign whatever saying, yep, it passes. And then in reality, I mean, the reason why we have these is because of a very real issue. And out in California, for instance, there's a huge energy issue. There's a crisis with how much energy that's available. So,
It's not so much
there's
a
a just
crisis. We are managing it pretty
okay,
well.
fair
The
enough.
Energy Code has done a pretty amazing
No,
job,
that's
and
a fair point.
allowing our grid to be a lot more stable. Do either of
But
you live in
without
California?
no, we both live in the Boston area.
Yeah.
Okay. So Boston area, you guys, New York is so very similar to California in terms of
Yep.
our grid issues, of which we have a lot of people on the grid, and we're using more and more electricity with all our devices. And, on a super hot day where everyone has their air conditioner on, there's
Yep.
brownouts and blackouts. So the energy code
Hmm.
in the 2000, it was the 2001 code, they totally changed the metrics. And we don't measure kilowatts anymore. We
Hmm.
measure, when are you using your energy over the course of the day, peak load versus non-peak load. When is it over the
Yep.
course of the year? Is it when there's a lot of need for electricity, or there isn't a lot of need for electricity? And how can what we're building into the building support a more stable grid, and a grid that doesn't have to keep adding power plants? Let's
Right.
use the resources we have. And I honestly, from what we've been seeing, even with all the people who don't meet code, they're the cowboys out there. They know better. We are making a difference, and we haven't had to add any power plants here in California.
That's great. So, all right. So now let's look forward a little bit. As we continue down this trend of electrification, we're seeing more and more heat pumps being used instead of fossil fuels, electric vehicles, charging stations. So what's next for what do you see? Obviously, like, you're not a complete mind reader, but what do you think is coming down the road for code to help with some of these, with an increased grid demand?
Well, of course, there's the push to bring on more renewable energy sources to the grid. And politics does make a difference in all of that. There's a lot that we've been able to accomplish that within just a few months is completely being destroyed. So we have to look at that also. What is it that people are finding is still what they feel is important, and is it the majority? And where are you? So electrification, there's a lot of people who feel it's how we're going to save the planet, and other people who think it's a bunch of bunk. And I, as an energy consultant, I get to deal with both sides of the fence, and I have to kind of figure out what's your language. What's your love language? Is your love language saving the planet? Is your love language you want to manage your utility bill? Is your love language I want no restrictions and I want to do whatever I want to do, and don't even talk to me about how much it's going to cost me? That's my business, not your business. So in looking at that, and I say all of that because those major groups of people are helping support what are the codes doing, because remember, it's a stakeholder process. So I do feel, yes, we're going towards a world of electrification, but there's some hiccups in the road that have been happening. We have California just passed Assembly Bill 130, which says, hey, guess what? Energy code, environmental code, Cal Green Title 24 Part 11, you guys have been a little bit too aggressive. And we're going to make you pause. And we're not going to allow you to make any changes to the energy code or to the environmental code for residential occupancies for 6 years. And typically the code changes every 3 years. So here's, so what you're saying, predict to the future. I just feel that the pathway we have been going is starting to change. We now have, which unused pathway are you going to go? And that's where we are right now. We don't really 100% know where we're going to end up. I think we go in this direction, and now it's starting to split, and I'm not 100% sure where it's going. But I do have to say I believe in controls. I believe in controls of lighting, of mechanical systems. I like to control my children, my life. I like controls. I like bumper guards that allow me to decide myself, how am I using my energy, and what does that mean to my utility bill?
No,
I've got controls all over my house because my kids leave lights on them, and let me tell you, that's not allowed.
No, and I, like whenever I talk to somebody about lighting controls for the first time, I usually say, we have lighting controls because we can't trust people to turn the lights off. So, that's the reality of the situation, is that we are trying to extract that reliance on people doing the right thing and just having automated features doing it for them. But
can I share with you a favorite story?
Absolutely.
I have a favorite story. So I do a lot of teaching. So I teach the energy code up and down the state, and I do it mainly for Energy Code ACE, but also for the CEC and other organizations. And I was teaching a bunch of building inspectors. And there was this guy in the room going, these lighting controls are the stupidest thing ever, because all you need is this. That's all you need. I'm just sitting there going, get it all out, buddy. Just get it all out. And I just went, do your kids use this? Does everyone around you use this? Is it reliable? And he sat down. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, well, we're almost out of time here, so I want to wrap this up because I feel like there's so much that people just don't understand about code, about why code exists, about the language and everything. And so, it's great to have somebody like you on the show to talk about it, because you are deep in the weeds. You're seeing it all. You're advising on it. You're, heavily invested in energy code because you see the reason why it exists and you want it to achieve its initiatives, which, at the end of the day, we're trying to save energy, but under what conditions are we trying to save energy? How are we achieving that energy savings? And regionally, what needs to be specifically tailored towards that. And so as a result, we do have this variety out there. But to your point, we have a large number of people heavily involved in these documents. So they can be quite challenging to navigate because of the fact that they try to make this as precise as possible. And as a result, they make the language hard to read for people who are unfamiliar with it. And so there's some excellent resources out there. Number one, just hiring somebody like you. Number two, Energy Code ACE and ASHRAE's guides. And there are other resources that even manufacturers will produce that give some guidance. But at the end of the day, it cannot replace just reading the code and getting familiar with code language.
And you're going to read it differently than the person next to you.
Right.
A couple of the leaders in the lighting control industry, of which I won't say their names, we talk all the time. And we were talking about this one simple line of code. And I'm like, oh, it means this. And they were like, no, it means this. I'm like, no, it means this. And we decided to step away and we went, oh my gosh, it means both things. So there are interpretations that are incorrect. There are interpretations that are correct. And I find your own knowledge is going to bring your understanding to the table as you read those words.
Right. No, and that reminds me of a story that I got into a heated debate with somebody over a sentence, and it was because of a comma. That was the reason we got into the argument, because the comma created an interrupt in the sentence implying separation. And so I interpreted it one way, he interpreted it a different way. So to your point, it does vary across the board how the code is interpreted. And if we are interpreting it differently, then the building officials are, of course, interpreting it differently. And so that's why it's important to get familiar with the AHJs and how they interpret the code, rather than just reading it straight and thinking you already know how it works. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't pass permit, that's because the code official determined that it doesn't pass permit, not because it doesn't actually pass permit. So it's not like there's some secondary background check from a computer saying, yeah, it actually passed. But again, for highest success, I mean, it's about knowledge, experience, familiarity, all of these things. And so people who are involved in the project still need to become familiar with these things. As a lighting control specialist, I go to the code all the time because I need to double check whether or not I'm in compliance with it. And, I may misread a sentence and I'm like, that sounds wrong. I'm going to check with a buddy of mine, and buddy will say, no, this is what this means. It's
right.
Like, oh, right.
Call
right,
a buddy.
Yeah.
Call a buddy.
Yeah.
You should always call a buddy. Yeah.
But that's why if you don't have those buddies, somebody like you, somebody like Ron or me, like, we're good resources
help desk,
to
get
tap
Energy
for
Code
that.
ACE.
Absolutely. No, these resources exist for a reason and are subsidized for a reason. So, hopefully people from this episode are gonna realize that they need to open the code book at this point. Like, there's no excuse to never read code.
When I answer the questions on the help desk, I always bring it back to the code language, and I put the code language in there and I give the link exactly to that code section, just trying to say, unless you read this yourself, you're not going to be understanding what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, no, it's so true. Is you really do have to put in your own time and your own research. And while there are fantastic resources out there, you still have to put in some of your own time and research to understand what those resources are providing to you, right? If someone calls you, you can give them all the information in the world, but if they still don't understand it at a base level, it's not going to matter what you tell them. So everyone has to be somewhat familiar with at least the basics in their area and know where to find those resources for the projects they're working on. Gina, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic conversation. And you're right. We can't trust everyone to use their finger. It is not going to work.
Hey, we don't dial on
Controls
phones
exist.
anymore, right?
Right. Controls exist for a reason. I love it. That was such a great story. Gina, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I will just close this out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more, including information about the NAILD LSC. Maybe one day we'll get to the point where we certify code officials. I don't know. But also, huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which we could not do this show without. MaxLite, maxlite.com/CMAX. Check them out. If you have one of those projects where you realize
You
after the
didn't do
fact
what you were
needed
supposed to
lighting
do.
control, they are an excellent solution for that, because you put in MaxLite light fixtures, you can then add light controls and not even have to worry about the wiring. So you have that solution right there, meeting code compliance out of the box. So check them out, maxlite.com/CMAX. But until then, thank you for joining me. And Gina, thank you. This was an awesome conversation.